Bhutan, a small Himalayan nation, just made a move that could change the entire financial system forever. And no one is talking about it. They're not just buying Bitcoin, they're mining it, stockpiling it, and treating it as a national strategic reserve. This could be the start of a global Bitcoin arms race, and investors who see this early will have a massive advantage. So what does this mean for you? Let's break it down, because this could be the biggest Bitcoin play of the decade. I've come across this interesting article from the Financial Times, which puts the headline crystal clear: Bhutan Bitcoin reserves are already common currency. It says that while the US has actually confirmed that it's going to adopt strategic Bitcoin reserve in the country, other sovereign nations are quietly amassing their own. And it gives the example of Bhutan, which is a tiny kingdom in the Himalayas, which holds around the 5th biggest national Bitcoin stash in the world. It goes on to say that countries come by their tokens in different ways, which is true. In the case of the US, they've actually, through their law enforcement agency, seized the Bitcoin when taking down the infamous Silk Road online marketplace. And then there are other countries, particularly in the Western world, where they've amassed in a similar sort of way through forfeits of criminal activity. In the case of the UK, they've done precisely that, where they've actually seized the 61,000 odd Bitcoin by the end of December last year. And there's a handful of other Western nations who've adopted Bitcoin holdings through the seizure of criminal activity. But in the case of Bhutan, being in the Himalayas, this is quite the opposite. It's very interesting, their story. They've actually used the hydraulic power through the rivers along the Himalayas to actually mine their Bitcoin operations, to mine brand new Bitcoins as a result of the use of that hydraulic power through the network of computers that they've established in their kingdom. They have actually contemplated the prospect of exporting the hydropower, but they've actually deemed quite rapidly that that would be an expensive venture to do. So instead what they've done was taken the decision to actually monetize their energy resource that they have, which is hydropower, and turning that into gigawatts, into money, by mining Bitcoin at home. I think this is very interesting. And this is a similar sort of method that we are seeing in other more emerging nations where they have abundant energy supply through the establishment of their Bitcoin rigs in the country, mining their coins through those tapped in energy resources that they have, which is clearly an advantage to other nations who do not have that. So that is very interesting in the case of Bhutan. And sovereign Bitcoin reserves, it says they are a relatively small phenomenon, but they're here to stay. Ever since the announcement that's been made by the greatest elephant in the room, which is the US, well, it's the ultimate signal that this is not going to go away. It's here to stay forever and for good. And one of the main reasons, it says that the old school currency reserves are also becoming riskier. And if you look into my other videos, we have the yen, the Japanese yen, have been recently strong, where historically it's always been low. So you've got to take into account that there's a lot of shenanigans that the central banks and other nation states playing around with the volatility of their own national fiat currency. So it just comes to show that even those currencies, fiat currencies, are not reliable. And you have other countries where they are subjected to sanctions and regimes, like in the case of Russia, their seized assets, foreign assets. That is another driver to actually contemplate mining their own Bitcoins or even purchasing Bitcoins into their own strategic reserves or national stockpiles. So this is clear. What does this mean for you as an investor? It means Bitcoin is no longer just a retail or institutional asset, it's becoming a sovereign asset. It means that institutional money will soon flood into Bitcoin like never before. It means that Bitcoin's long-term price potential is now tied to government level adoption. Bitcoin has just started the trend, but the big question is, who's next? Will El Salvador double down? Will we see an oil-rich nation like the UAE or even Saudi Arabia adopting Bitcoin next? And most importantly, are you positioning yourself before Bitcoin becomes the world's reserve asset? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, And should more countries follow Bhutan's example? Well, let's discuss that in the comment sections below. If you enjoyed today's episode, please hit the like button to share the video to friends and colleagues at work. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel, as I regularly publish interesting videos such as these, anything to do with Bitcoin, blockchain technology, and the future of finance. So I'll see you next time.